Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from Daniel's second chapter. We made it all the way up until the 23rd verse in that chapter. We're going to take it at least as far to the 45th, but if there's time left enough, we'll take it all the way to the end, to the 49th verse. But before we do any of that, we just want to briefly review what we read in the previous chapter. In the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, that would have been the events described in this chapter would have taken place in 603 BM, before Messiah. He was visited by a dream he can't remember, but is deeply troubling him, and the uncertainty and the mystery, he has a sense of its significance, but he cannot remember the details or the sequence of events, so he summons all his wise men, astrologers, magicians, etc., to interpret this dream. And when they say, give us the detail, because it was, some of them might have been able to interpret it if they had the details, but he says, I basically says, without completely saying, I don't remember, but if you don't interpret this and resurrect this dream in its detail and then give me an accurate interpretation, I'm determined to execute all the wise men and all those people in his employ en masse throughout his kingdom. So the king, Nebuchadnezzar, is moved by a sort of murderous passion for the mystery which is troubling him and confusing him, and gives him a sense of shock that he's unable to overcome. And there's a little bit of a dialogue and exchange between the representatives of these communities and the king, and then he orders the head of his guard to execute him en route. But whilst en route, he encounters Daniel by providence, who tells him of the situation and the dilemma. That Daniel takes it upon himself to approach the king, in whose good graces he had earned, we read of in the previous chapter, because his wisdom and understanding exceeded tenfold, we are told, those of the native Babylonians. And so he asked for a little bit of time to consult with the one who can give him the meaning, that being Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel. And we read of two prayers. He returns home to the company of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, his three companions, and they pray, and they pray, one, for the answer. They need the dream resurrected from a blank slate and also its meaning. And then we read a more detailed, as content-wise, prayer of thanksgiving to whom they owe it to. And they acknowledge his supremacy and reveal some of his attributes and acknowledge him as the one who unlocks the mysteries of all secrets. So they take no credit for themselves, and they will claim no credit before the king once Daniel approaches him, as we read in the 24th verse. So Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise ones of Babylon. He went and said to him, "Do not destroy the wise ones of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I shall show the interpretation to the king." Arioch was the name of the man who was entrusted to be the captain of the king's personal bodyguard, and so he was en route to carry out this mission once more. Daniel approaches him and asks him to present him before the king, because he's going to ease his conscience, which is troubled by this mysterious, unidentified dream, an uninterpretable dream. So he asked to be permitted to his presence. Then Arioch brought Daniel in a hurry before the king, and said thus to him, "I have found a man among the sons of the exile of Judah, who makes known to the king the interpretation." In other words, he has found the answer to all his prayers, and it's in the form of one who is a child of Abraham, exiled from Judah and Jerusalem, whose relation with the Elohim of Abraham makes him able to know and understand the dreams and interpretations of that of a king who could not remember, let alone interpret, the dream. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, "Are you able to make known to me the dream by which I have seen and its interpretation?" In the first chapter, we read that Daniel and his three companions are assigned Babylonian names. So Daniel's one is Belteshazzar, so that's how the king would have addressed him and known him as. And the question he asks is, can you do what no one else has been able to do? All the wise men in my employ who I have brought before my presence to answer this question, to which I provide no details, are you able to do it? Because that would be an immense blessing and a burden, a relief of burden. And Daniel answered before the king and said, "The secret which the king is asking, the wise ones, the astrologers, the magicians, and the diviners are unable to show it to the sovereign." This was by their own admission, we read, I think, in the 10th verse. By their own admission and confession, they expose the incompetencies of their practices and their professions to provide the answer that Daniel can, because he's more intimately connected to a spiritually supreme being than their practices, which revolve around illusions and esoteric knowledge, can provide. But there is an Elah in the heavens who reveals secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what is to be in the latter days. Your dream and the vision of your head upon your bed were these. So he takes no credit. Once more, he gives it all to the man upstairs, the man above, who has the ability to discern the secrets, and he is an omniscient being, so he's literally incapable of not only forgetting anything he's ever thought, but anything any of us has ever thought. So he is able to tell Daniel the meaning of this dream, which has historical ramifications, as indicated by what is to be in the latter days. So there we catch a premonition of the nature of the interpretation, which is future-oriented. So Nebuchadnezzar had a sense that there was something significant in it, and it was more significant than for himself. It was the progression of history by the hand of providence, who controls and arranges history to march according to his purposes. As for you, O king, on your bed your thoughts came up. What is going to take place after this? And he who reveals secret has known to you what shall be. So once more he reiterates the historical significance of this dream. It's going to take place after this, meaning after they are alive, after this moment in time, after this present time. And he once more gives credit to Elohim, who unlocks the mysteries of our innermost secrets and remembers and resurrects what we forget sometimes. As for me, this secret has not been revealed to me, because I have more wisdom than anyone living, but for our sakes who make known the interpretation to the king, and that you should know the thoughts of your heart. So Daniel self-deprecates his own wisdom, his own natural abilities. It is a supernatural power which enables his otherwise unattainable understanding of this profound, deeply unsettling mystery. So it's nothing in himself. It is all Elohim and only Elohim who is able to give Daniel the interpretation that the king desires. You, O king, were looking on and saw a great image. The great image, and its brightness excellence, was standing before you, and its form was awesome. Image has idolatrous connotations. These were the images of the imagined deities that the polytheistic nation worshipped. They likened them to image with often human and often animalistic features and characteristics. They represented them in statues and images of wood and stone and earthly material. But so that is what this is. This is in an image, and in the third chapter, which comes after that, I've done one on that too. You can type in Corey Johnston, Daniel 3 for more on that. We read that King Nebuchadnezzar, even after coming to an acknowledgement and confession of the superior, if not supreme, power of Daniel's Elohim, erects a statue of himself to be worshipped in mass, but is resisted by Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel's 3 companions from the exile up in Babylon, and they are thrown into a furnace of fire. We read that he orders it to be heated 7 times the normal heat, and it is so dramatically and extremely hot that those who are commanded to escort them to the fire expire while en route, but even they remain unscathed from the fire, and that convinces him further that the Elohim of the captive Judean people are in fact superior. So it's a gradual acknowledgement that we witness in Nebuchadnezzar. By the 4th chapter, we witness him reduced to a state of there's a medical term for the state of mind he finds himself in, where he thinks, lives, and acts like a beast. So he had to, be degraded to the behavior and mentality of an animal in order to exalt the Elohim once more. So in each chapter, he comes to a realization, but not a full conversion. This image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its abdomen and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. So these materials, these diverse respective range of material properties are symbolically alluding to historical kingdoms which come after Nebuchadnezzar's and form their character and whatnot. You were looking on until a stone was cut out without hands, and it smote the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Now what we notice is that from the head to the feet or foundation, the material gets progressively weaker and more vulnerable, and so the foot is really the foundation, and because it was on feet of iron and clay, the rock, which was cut out without human hands, was able to smash them into pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together, and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. And the wind took them away, so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled all the earth. This stone which smotes the image, respectively representing the progression of historical hegemonies to come after Babylon, is the kingdom of the Messiah, which will be eternal in nature. So all these human worldly empires come and go as providence arranges. Nothing lasts forever, except for the kingdom which ultimately subsumes all the earths. These earthly kings are entrusted as stewards and placed in their positions of power by providence, but one day all that's going to end as the control of the earth returns to its rightful creator and owner. This is the dream and its interpretation. We declare before the sovereign. So he answers the first part of the mystery that's troubling Nebuchadnezzar, the sequence of events in his dreams, which he gives no indication of having even the slightest remembrance of. All he can remember is that he was deeply disturbed by it, but he couldn't even remember what Daniel just described as transpiring in the course of the dream. You, O king, are a king of kings, for the Elah of heavens has given you a kingdom, power, and strength, and esteem. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, being a self-driven and self-motivated man, would have thought that he conquered and rose to supremacy on the geopolitical chessboard through his own cunning, his own ability. But Daniel makes it quite clear that it is the hand of providence that has placed him where he now finds himself, in a position now that he had yet to fully conquer even Egypt or Judah. Those dates would take place in 598 and 586 BM, respectively. But even so, he was his supremacy at this moment in time when this dream is recorded. Remember, the second year of his reign, which places us in 603 BM, would have been unrivaled in power. And whatever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand, and has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. So everything that it comes into his control, his jurisdiction, including the humans and the birds and the beast of the field, all the animals, all the humans in his empire, has been given to him by his hand. He thought he seized it, but through military might, but it had actually been providentially arranged, and he is identified as the head of gold. And after you rises up another king lower than yours, and another third kingdom of bronze that rules over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom is as strong as iron, because iron crushes and shatters all. So like iron that breaks in pieces, it crushes and breaks all these. So we have a description of the 4 imperial hegemons that are going to rule over that Judea is going to be at the mercy and exchange of the hands. This is what the Savior refers to as the time of the Gentiles, which really begins in 636 when the Babylonian Empire rose to supremacy. They would conquer and eliminate Assyria by 612, and Egypt by 598, and Judah by 586, and they would remain in power until 539 BM. We can read the description of the downfall of the kingdom, which happens in the twinkle of an eye, while the foolish grandson and successor of Nebuchadnezzar, Belteshazzar, is partying with the items that his grandfather had confiscated from the Temple of Solomon, a writing on a hand visible to all, but undiscernible and uninterpretable to everyone in the room except Daniel, who is summoned to that. You can find out more details on that chapter in Corey Johnston, Daniel 5, if you type that in the YouTube search engine. But they were displaced that very night by the Medo-Persian Empire, in whose service Daniel continues in the same capacity that he did for Nebuchadnezzar, that was discontinued by his grandson Belteshazzar, that being the prime minister. And the Medo-Persian, even though it's larger than its predecessor, the Babylonian Empire, it's less stable. Nebuchadnezzar ruled with an iron fist and kept all under his domain and jurisdiction in unity, but the Persian Empire from start to finish was plagued with internal divisions and pressures and revolts from the outside. So even though they were larger, they were not quite as strong or united or anything else as its predecessor. And then the kingdom which comes after that, the bronze, likened to bronze, was the Greek Empire, which really began when Alexander set out from Macedonia in 330 BM, and then we can read of the divisions of these in Daniel 11. After he dies with an unnamed successor, the kingdom splinters into 4 main kingdoms, the principles of which are the kingdom of the south, Egypt, and kingdom of the north, which is, and the transfer of of Judah and Israel into their hands is described in that chapter. I think it took place sometime in the year 198 BM, but by 63 BM, the Seleucids are going to be wiped off the scene by the Romans who conquer them. They're likened to the iron, which crushes and breaks all these, even though the Ptolemaic dynasty would continue to rule until 30 BM, till Octavian Caesar decisively triumphed over Mark Antony and his ally and wife, the Egyptian queen Cleopatra, the last pharaoh, the last of the Ptolemaic dynasty in 30. It's really in 63 when, because remember, by this time the control of Palestine, what the Romans come to call Palestine, is in the hands of the Seleucids, and it's taken from them, and the Romans assign the name Palestine to Israel as an insult to remind them of the It's derived from the word Philistine, to take away their native claim in any way they can over the land in which they dwell. And Rome lasts until 476 AD. The final king, Romulus Augustus Caesar, the 12-year-old boy king, is displaced and removed from the throne. By this time, he is residing in Ravenna. But this all happens. None of these names of these empires or even the dates are revealed to Daniel. He just knows that they're going to be. He doesn't know who they are. We know this with the gift of historical hindsight. And the 41st verse reads, "Yet as you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom is to be divided, but some of the strength of the iron is to be in it, because you saw the iron mixed with muddy clay." The division of the Roman Empire into two separate administrative districts was initiated by Domitian, who was the successor of the predecessor of Constantine, who converted the Roman Empire en masse to Christianity. And but even after that, 60% of what was once the Roman Empire is now firmly Muslim territory, but the Christian European one would be divided into separate kingdoms after that. So that's what that is. This is referring to the divided kingdom. And of course, the Byzantine Empire, centrally located in Constantinople, which was named after Constantine. It was impenetrable strategic defensive port, which would take until the year 1453 to be sacked and conquered by the Muslims, who had been at it since the beginning. But the city did held firm for a little less than a millennia of their repeated encroachments. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom is partly strong and partly brittle. So the mixture of iron and clay represents the strengths and weaknesses of the Roman Empire. Its strengths were in its law, its military, its engineering abilities, its practical utilitarian genius. Its weakness was in the diversity and the range of cultures which coexisted in uneasy tension under the umbrella of a centrally located city in the center of Italy, which ruled across the Mediterranean. So this created bridges which couldn't be bridged, and which ultimately contributed to its culmination and collapse. "And as you saw iron mixed with muddy clay, they are mixing themselves with the seed of men, but they are not clinging to each other, even as iron does not mix with clay." So the European empires were united by dynastic marriages throughout Middle Ages and beyond, all the way up until their almost universal extinction. So but these families are the marriage does not unite them. It does not quell the war, the continent of Europe being embroiled in war throughout the Middle Ages and beyond. And in the days of these kings, the Ella of the heaven shall appoint a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, nor the reign pass on to other people. It crushes and puts an end to all these reigns, and it shall stand forever. So no empire or of earthly rule lasts forever. We witness this throughout human history. America has to fall in order for the Antichrist to rise, anti-Messiah to rise, because the platform through which he's going to rise and rule is one world government, whereby not only our sovereignty but every other national sovereignty will be eliminated. But that's all going to culminate with the millennial kingdom, which displaces the brief 7-year reign of the anti-Messiah, whose final half of that 7-year stint is going to be especially tyrannical. That's the period of tribulation, which will really test the faith of a lot of people. I don't envy anyone who has to live in that time, and I, in all honesty, am not prepared to do so, though that is something that I'm working on. The mere concept of the tribulation, quite honestly, frightens me, but it's something I feel I can overcome and be prepared for in the passage of time, because it may come in this lifetime. Because you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountains without hands, and that it crushed the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great Elah has made known to the king what shall be after this. And this dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. So he makes known that he had made that Elohim had made known to him through Daniel, the one who's telling the message, that this is what is going to come to pass in the historical progression, which comes after your reign and rule. And the dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. He speaks with the confidence and certainty of an inspired prophet whose source of inspiration is inerrant. So the dream and its details were not disputed. They awakened the memory of Nebuchadnezzar, who had fallen asleep on what he came across with what he had fallen asleep over when he woke up, but it is resurrected, and the interpretation is sufficiently convincing enough to him. We're not going to have time to read all the way to the end, so we'll just summarize what comes after. Nebuchadnezzar is moved to worship Daniel and reward him with gifts, and he comes to a confession of the supremacy, if not the superiority, if not the unique supremacy of the Elah of Daniel, since he has revealed a secret which none of his native wise men or magicians or soothsayers, etc., could tell him. And he gives him, elevates him to the position of prime minister. So having interpreted this dream and having quieted the dilemma, the storm of confusion, which was deeply disturbing the king, he earns the king's trust sufficiently to give him the functional equivalent of the prime minister. And now that he has such an access, he appoints to the king's permission Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, 2 positions of prominence of Babylon. So the dream is significant in itself, and what has already come to pass in history and what has yet to come to pass. The Roman Empire has survived in numerous forms, one of which is the Catholic Church. We don't have time to elaborate on that explanation. but also what awaits us. So not only what has already come to pass, but what also has come to awake us. And this is significant for Daniel as he rises in the king's esteem to perform the function of prime minister. But that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.